Welcome to the 2024 Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program Application Development Training Series. In this session, we will be discussing the fundamentals of the Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program. The first thing we want you to know is that help is available to you through this process. One resource is our Regional Fire Program Specialist. There is at least one in each of the 10 FEMA regions. The URL here will take you to the website to view their contact information. The next option is the AFG Help Desk. It is staffed during business hours by fire service professionals that know the program and the fire service. The last bullet contains a link to our website where you can download self-help materials to assist you with developing your application and your narrative. We will discuss these later in the presentation. The AFG program sends out monthly newsletters and periodic program updates as necessary. Ensure you are signed up to receive these critical emails. All awards have been made for all 2023 AFG programs. You should have received your turn-down letter if you were not awarded. If you'd like more information on why your application was not successful, there is a link in your turn-down letter to request that additional assistance, or you can simply contact your regional fire program specialist. Depending on when you are viewing this webinar, the 2024 AFG application period is open or will be opening soon. The application period will open at 9 a.m. on the first day and end at 5 p.m. on the final day. All times are Eastern Time. Let's discuss what is new for 2024. Language was added to clarify ineligible items under the Wellness and Fitness activity. We discussed those in the Wellness and Fitness, Modification to Facilities, and Training session. For state fire training academies, language was added to clarify eligible costs with respect to the repair of training props. Under the Equipment activity, the Other EMS Equipment line item was replaced with several specific items that were then prioritized high, medium, or low. Please watch our equipment and PPE training sessions to learn more. This session is comprised of an overview of the AFG program and its components, a brief discussion on the award process, and what you need to be doing now to prepare to apply. We'll wrap up with our top 10 best practices. The purpose of the Assistance to Firefighters Grant is to enhance the safety of the public and the firefighters by providing direct federal assistance to eligible fire departments, non-affiliated EMS organizations, and state fire training academies to address the urgent safety needs of their agencies and organizations. The Fire Grants programs have three parts. 1. The Assistance to Firefighters Grant, which is what we're discussing today. 2. Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response, better known as SAFER, which provides funding to fire departments to increase staffing to meet national standards, either through hiring full-time staff or the recruitment and retention of volunteers. 3. Fire Prevention and Safety, which provides funding to bolster fire prevention activities within a municipality. It also has a research and development component to fund studies that could impact the fire service and firefighter safety. Below each program is the funding that Congress has appropriated for FY 2024. Initially, both AFG and SAFER are equally funded at $324 million. However, 10% of the funds allocated to the AFG are used to fund the Fire Prevention and Safety Grant. Eligible applicants for the Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program are fire departments and fire districts, which can be governmental agencies, municipal, county, tribal, or independent nonprofit 501c3, 501c4 organizations formally recognized to provide fire suppression to a population within a geographically fixed primary first due response area. Non-affiliated EMS organizations are not affiliated with a hospital or a fire department, may be public or nonprofit emergency medical service entities providing medical transportation to a population geographic area in which emergency medical services are not adequately provided by a fire department, and all 50 of the state fire training academies as recognized by the National Fire Academy. Congress determines each time they authorize a program how the funding will be allocated between eligible applicants. Congress decided in the 2013 reauthorization that career, combination, and volunteer fire departments will each receive no less than 25% of the appropriation. If you are a paid on-call stipend department, you are considered combination regardless of how much your members are paid. 10% is set aside for open competition between all eligible applicants. State fire training academies receive no more than 3%. Non-affiliated EMS receive no more than 2%. It is important to make the distinction between the fire department's no less than set aside for the fire departments and the no more than for EMS and state fire training academies. In addition, there are some set-asides within these set-asides. No more than 25% of the appropriation can be spent on vehicles, and no less than 25% can be spent on microgrants, depending on overall score. The Assistance to Firefighters Grant requires that awardees contribute a cost share depending on the population of the community they serve. Populations 20,000 and less are required to contribute 5%. Populations between 20,000 and 1 million are required to contribute 10%. Populations over 1 million are required to contribute 15%. In-kind match is not allowed in the program, so the match has to be cash. Recipients may contribute more than their match requirements to ensure they are able to complete the project. Applicants do not have to have their cost share allocated at the time of the application, but will need to document their match in payment requests and closeout documentation. Match is calculated by dividing your total project cost by the percentage. An example would be for 5% divide your total cost by 1.05, which would equal the federal share. Subtract the federal share from the total project cost to determine local cost share. 5% is 1.05, 10% is 1.10, and 15% is 1.15. The population of the jurisdiction served by the recipient will determine the maximum amount of AFG program funding a recipient is eligible to receive. But no recipient may receive an award that exceeds 1% of the available grant funds in FY 2024 or $3.2 million. FEMA may waive this aggregate cap in individual cases where FEMA determines that a recipient has an extraordinary need for a grant that exceeds the aggregate cap. FEMA may not waive the statutory funding caps based on population. This table explains the maximum funding that a recipient may receive in FY 2024. In cases of demonstrated economic hardship, and upon the request of the recipient, the FEMA administrator may waive or reduce an AFG program cost share. The FEMA administrator established guidelines for determining what constitutes economic hardship and published these guidelines in Information Bulletin number 427. A link to Information Bulletin 427 can be found on page 93 of the 2024 Notice of Funding Opportunity. Applicants required to submit documentation supporting their request for an economic hardship waiver at the time of the application by attaching the supporting documentation to the grant application. Failure to provide documentation at the time of the application or address the conditions or following the prescribed format in Information Bulletin number 427 may result in the waiver being denied. FEMA does not make decisions regarding the direction and priorities of this program. FEMA relies on the fire service to provide that direction. FEMA brings in the fire service in the form of representatives from these 9 fire service organizations named the Criteria Development Panel. The Criteria Development Panel meets annually to discuss the program, determine what's important in the fire service for that given year, and sets the priorities of the program. If you have additional questions about the direction of the program, I encourage you to reach out to your affiliate organization on this list. In addition, these organizations are responsible for nominating people to serve at panel review. If you are interested in serving as a panelist, please reach out to your affiliate of the respective organization and ask to be nominated. This section will be a brief overview of the award process. The application process will begin with the release of the Notice of Funding Opportunity. This precedes the application period beginning. Once applications are submitted, they are subjected to electronic scoring where a computer will compare various criteria, weighted questions, and program priorities to your requests. This occurs when the application period closes. Applications that score well enough through this process will move on to peer panel review, where 3 fire service members from like organizations will score your narrative. This typically occurs a few weeks to a month after the application period closes. The computer score will be averaged with the peer panel review score, which will provide the application's final score. All applications in the fundable range will undergo technical reviews to ensure that the items are eligible and the costs are reasonable. Awards will be made based on score ranking from highest until we run out of money. The Notice of Funding Opportunity is immediately preemptive of the application opening. It provides a multitude of important information, much of which informs what we're going to talk about today. Some of this critical information includes the laws that authorize and appropriate the program, the objectives and, more importantly, the priorities of the program, identifies eligible applicants, provides key dates such as when the application opens and closes, discusses the review process and how the applications are scored, states the period of performance for awards, states many of the regulations that also are going to include the terms and conditions of future awards, and once it is released, you can download a copy of the Notice of Funding Opportunity at our website. Some of the major scoring criteria and competition criteria associated with the pre-score process are the priority of the items as it relates to the Notice of Funding Opportunity, the reason for purchase, which is articulated through your answers to the purpose question, which we will talk about in our activity-specific webinars, the age of the equipment you are requesting in comparison to other departments asking for the same equipment, call volume as it relates to other departments requesting like items, facility type and occupancy and modification type within the modifications to facilities activity, whether or not you are trained or asking for training for the equipment you're requesting, and other activity-specific criteria. Once the application period closes and all applications are submitted, they are subjected to the electronic scoring process in which a computer compares many aspects of the application to the priorities of the program, as well as categorizes applications to identify the greatest need. The request details section of the application contains most of the scored areas of the application. Those that score well enough in the pre-score process will move on to the peer review panel. The peer review panel score consists of fire service representatives from around the country that will review the 4 score narrative sections of your application. They will review each narrative section and assign it with strongly agree, agree, neither disagree nor agree, disagree, or strongly disagree. From a number standpoint, the respective scores for each of these is 100, 80, 60, 40, or 20. The scores assigned to all 4 sections are averaged, and this becomes your peer review panel score. Your peer review panel score is then averaged with the score you received in the pre-scoring process, and this becomes the final score. Once the final scores are compiled, FEMA calculates what we expect to be the fundable range based on the appropriation, amount of applications we receive, and their respective scores. Those that look to be in the fundable range will move on to the technical review, where program staff will verify the information provided in the application and remove any ineligible items. They will also reduce costs based on market research or reduce quantities of items based on information provided in the application. Finally, the staff will recommend the application for award once all of these steps are completed. Once the technical review is completed, awards are made based on score, from highest scores until there are no longer funds available. Awards are made in rounds, usually weekly, and we expect there to be somewhere between 8 and 10 rounds of awards before the funds are expended. Awards are typically announced on Fridays. Your organization's authorized organization representative, identified in FEMA Go, will be notified via email on the morning of the award. Once the award is made, the recipient must accept the award within 30 days. If more time is needed, you must notify your regional fire program specialist as soon as possible. As noted earlier, the authorized organization representative will be notified of the award and will be the primary contact throughout the period of performance, so it is critical to keep this contact information of this person up to date. If you do not receive an award, the authorized organization representative will receive a turn-down notice via email. These turn-down letters often do not provide adequate information for you to completely understand why your application was not funded, so there is a link within the email to receive a turn-down consultation, which I recommend you take advantage of. In 2015, FEMA began creating what is now FEMA Go. This system is designed to consolidate all the 41 grant programs FEMA administers through 10 different systems into one grants management system. The Assistance to Firefighter Grant Program was mitigated into the system in late 2018, and once the application period opens, you can find it at the URL on this slide. The FEMA Go application is designed to work well with certain browsers. Please ensure that you are using the appropriate one. You will also want to ensure that while filling out the application, you only have that browser open and close all others. Avoid using tablet-type devices while accessing FEMA Go. The System for Awards Management was introduced back in 2012. This system is a repository for all vendors doing business with the federal government. To apply for the Assistance to Firefighter Grant Program, you must be registered and active in the system for the award management. Your SAM.gov account becomes inactive after a year if no action has been taken to update the account. So make sure this is done prior to applying to ensure your account does not become inactive through the award process. Entity validation for new registrants can take anywhere from 5 days to several weeks, depending on the documentation needed for validation. If you do not have a SAM.gov account, it is imperative you get started on this immediately. This system is free and requires no cost to register. In addition, help getting registered is also free. Here on this slide is a web address for the Federal Support Desk and their phone number depending on your preference. Information such as your unique entity identifier and bank account numbers will be automatically synced in FEMA Go once you've registered and added your organization. For new registrants searching for their organization in FEMA Go, you'll need to know their UEI as assigned in SAM.gov in order to locate your organization. The person designated in SAM.gov as your e-business point of contact will be the person that needs to register in FEMA Go as your account administrator and link your organization. Once this is done, your account administrator can add other registered users within your organization and assign them permissions as needed. It is important to remember that only those with permissions as an authorized organization representative can submit applications, accept awards, and complete many of the grants management related tasks once the award is accepted. Please reach out to someone if you are having trouble getting set up in SAM.gov or FEMA Go. If you are already registered with FEMA Go, you'll simply go here and log in using your login.gov credentials. If you do not already have a login.gov account, visit the site by clicking the Sign In with Login.gov button above. At the login page, select Create an Account and follow the prompt to create your account with your email address and at least one method of authentication, such as a mobile phone number or a link to the Authenticator app. Login.gov is a service that offers secure and private online access to government programs, such as federal benefits, services, and applications. With a Login.gov account, you can sign into multiple government websites with the same email address and password. You will need to ensure that the person designated as the e-business point of contact in the system for awards management also creates an account in this system, because they are the only person that can link an organization from the system for awards management to FEMA Go. Once you are logged in, this is what your account homepage will look like. On the left-hand side are grants that you are currently managing or that you are applying for. Once you've started your 2024 AFG application, you will simply click on the Continue Application to start where you left off. On the right-hand side are grants that are available for you to start a new application. Once the 2024 AFG application period opens, the opportunity to apply will be listed here. Click on Start Application to begin applying. Once your e-business point of contact has established the link between your organization's System for Awards Management account and FEMA Go, you can now start building out your team. To see who is currently on your team and what permissions they have, you can click on the organization's profile. Here is what you'll see once you click on Organization Profile. You'll see the option to manage your team. Once this is clicked, you can see the members of your team and their subsequent permissions. In order to add new members to your organization, you'll need to click on Add a New Team Member. To add a team member, that person must have their own login.gov credentials. Enter their email address that they use to register in FEMA Go, and an email will be sent to them to link up with your organization. This is also where you want to establish those users' permissions. If someone is a member of your agency and is going to be writing the application and submitting it, you will want to ensure you give them permission as an authorized organization representative. If you do not, that person that is writing the application will need to locate an authorized organization representative to submit their application. There are other permissions for those that are just grant writers or reviewers. When you click on the Grants button, it provides you with a list of grants that your organization is currently managing or applying for. From here, you can go in and manage a respective grant or continue filling out an application. You can also access the Manage Grants option and others by clicking the Select an Action dropdown. Now let's talk about the process for applying. This begins with determining what it is you're going to ask for and preparing to develop your application. One of the most critical parts of the planning phase is determining what it is you're going to ask for. We recommend you do some sort of risk assessment, needs analysis, or whatever you want to call it. It can be as formal or informal as you want it to be. In the end, you'll want to develop a list of items that you need and prioritize those. Then, once the Notice of Funding opportunity is released, you can compare your list of priorities to the priorities of the program. Make sure you focus on the items in the Notice of Funding opportunity that are noted as high priority. What this means is priorities on your list may or may not be a priority of the program. After reviewing the priorities associated with the program, you may need to reconsider what you plan to ask for. A good example of an item you may consider a priority is a boat. Many fire departments have water in their jurisdiction, and a boat becomes necessary to provide protection to your customers. However, a boat is not a high priority for the AFG program. One of the items that you will be asked is to determine your community classification and whether you are urban, suburban, or rural. This community classification can play a role in determining if some things are a high, medium, or low priority for your agency. It also plays a role in determining the swim lane you will be competing in during the electronic pre-scoring of your application. We will discuss in other sessions how and where this affects certain areas of the program. Notice the 4 criteria that we use to determine community classification. You will be asked to answer questions related to these criteria in the application, so it is important to know the information now so you're not looking for it later. We recommend using population as a tiebreaker if your jurisdiction has a mix of these criteria. There is a narrative section in the application that relates to critical infrastructure. Critical infrastructure is simply the infrastructure that exists within your community that you protect that if damaged or lost would have a significant impact on your community economically or otherwise. So in order to prepare, you should be putting together a list of the critical infrastructure that exists within your community. Every community has critical infrastructure, whether it's a major industrial area, a hospital, a transportation route, or possibly a lake that is a tourist destination. The call volume section in the application is centered on infers. Since we are in calendar year 2024, we will be looking for the call volume numbers for 2023, 2022, and 2021. Note, we are looking for the aggregated numbers for each of the call volume series. So for fire calls, we are looking for the total of those series 100 calls. You can start preparing now by pulling this data down and have it ready for when the application opens. This will save you significant time. You are absolutely allowed to hire a grant writer. The Assistance to Firefighter Grant Program will reimburse you the cost of a grant writer up to $1,500 if you are awarded. Your cost share, whether 5, 10, or 15%, is also applicable to the grant writer fee. Please note that if you do hire a grant writer, you will need to claim those costs in the request details section of your application. You must pay your grant writer within 90 days of the NOFO release and 30 days after the application period closes. Grant writer services must be competitively procured. We strongly recommend following your local procurement policy. You will be required to submit a copy of the grant writer's contract, a copy of the invoice or purchase order, a copy front and back of the canceled check used to pay the grant writer, or other acceptable proof of payments, and a copy of your local procurement policy. If you do not have a local procurement policy, please follow the federal requirements outlined in 2 CFR Part 200, 318 through 320. Some important things to consider when hiring a grant writer are: grant writers should be assigned permission as a grant writer in FEMA Go. Be wary of giving your grant writer permission as an authorized organization representative in FEMA Go, as this gives them the ability to do things like submitting your application or accepting your award. The application period is short and a busy time for grant writers. Some use templates or somewhat duplicated narratives, which could have significant impact on your panel review score if the panelists notice the similarities, and they will. If you hire a grant writer, they must be identified as such in the application, even if you are not requesting a reimbursement for the cost of their services. The AFG program consists of 3 separate applications. The first is Operations and Safety, that consists of 5 activities: equipment, personal protective equipment, training, modification to facilities, and wellness and fitness. You can learn more about these activities by watching our sessions on equipment and PPE and our sessions that cover wellness and fitness, modification to facilities, and training. The second is Vehicle Acquisition. Eligible applicants can request to replace unsafe fire apparatus and ambulances in their existing fleet. You can learn more about the vehicle acquisition activity by watching the session for that activity. The third is a regional request, where 2 or more departments combine to request a mutual need. Regional applications are discussed in our activity-specific training session. It's important to note that each of these applications move through the scoring process separately, as do the 5 activities under Operations and Safety. State fire training academies have their own separate and distinct applications. Here is a list of resources that can be found on our website. Some of what you'll want to consider for the purposes of planning and preparation are the application checklists. That provides you with all the information you'll need to compile and complete a large majority of your application. The application checklist is also helpful if you're doing a regional application and need to aggregate statistics from all your regional partners. In this case, you'll just want to provide each of your regional partners with a copy of the application checklist to be returned to you once completed, and then you could put all the numbers together. The next valuable resource is a self-evaluation sheet. There are 2 of these. one for a regular operations and safety request, and the second for a vehicle acquisition request. The self-evaluation sheet provides you with the exact criteria that the panelists will be reviewing your narratives based on. We recommend providing anyone that is going to be reviewing your narrative with a copy of the evaluation sheet so they can review it based on the same criteria and provide you with feedback as to whether you have touched on all the items necessary. Our last resource is the Narrative Development Toolkit. This document is built off the criteria outlined on the self-evaluation sheet and provides you with tips on how you can meet that criteria. There are even sample narratives included to help you get a feel for how your narratives should flow. In addition to printed documents, technical assistance is available through the help desk and the regional fire program specialists. Here are the top 10 best practices. Start preparing now. Read the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Use the application checklist and any other resources available to gather as much information as possible in advance of the application opening. Conduct your risk assessment and then align your requests with the highest priorities of the program. Make sure when developing your narrative to tell your department's story and the unique reason for your request. Stay away from vendor narratives, templates, or copying other departments' narratives. Read each question carefully, then answer it carefully. If you are not sure what a question is asking, reach out to your regional fire program specialist. Make sure that someone else is reviewing your entire application to include your narrative before you submit your application. Make sure that your authorized organization representative has submitted your application. Make sure to account for all eligible costs that you can associate with your request. These include training costs, service agreements, extended warranties, and possible performance bonds in the case of a vehicle acquisition. Ensure that your project can be completed within your grant's 2-year period performance and articulate that in your narrative. Ensure that you have support from your community decision-making authority and that they understand that there is a match requirement with this grant. Print your application using Control or Command P before you submit it. Finally, a reminder to reach out if you need anything throughout the application period. Thank you for taking the time to view this session and for your interest in the 2024 Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program.